I'm Casey Krolowitz.
And I'm Louis Casarella.
And we're your hosts for the STIHL How-To series.
STIHL created the How-To series to give you some tips and general advice on how to operate and maintain your STIHL power tools.
Of course, as always, STIHL recommends that you read and understand the information provided in the STIHL instruction manual that came with your STIHL product.
If you can't locate your manual, it, along with all our instruction and safety manuals, can easily be viewed and downloaded for free from our website at www.stihlusa.com.
So what do you say, Louie? Let's get started. Welcome back to the STIHL How-To series.
Before we get into sharpening your chain, there's an announcement that I'd like to make. My friend Casey here is leaving our How-To series to work with STIHL dealers out west.
I'll be the new territory manager at Intermountain Steel. I'll be calling on independent servicing dealers. But don't you worry, Louie, I'm leaving you in good hands. I'm pleased to introduce Jen Haar. Jen works at STIHL Incorporated in the training department. She really knows her stuff.
Hey guys!
So Jen, let's jump right in and show the viewers some simple tips on sharpening the chain on their chainsaw.
Great, let's go!
As we said, in this segment we want to give you some tips on sharpening the chain on your chainsaw.
Keeping your chain in good condition and sharpened properly is critical to the saw's performance, ease of use, and reduces wear and tear on your chainsaw.
Jen's right, and there's one thing that's guaranteed. When you use your chainsaw, it's going to get dull. Through windblown debris, tree bark will almost always have material embedded in it, and over time it's going to dull your chain. And if the chain running at full speed were to accidentally touch the ground for a fraction of a second, that could be just enough to require immediate sharpening.
When the chain's sharp, it'll cut smoothly in a straight line, throwing out nice wood chips, and you won't have to force the saw. It will pull itself through the cut. But if you have a dull chain, or one that isn't sharpened properly like we see here, the saw may cut off on an angle, or it may chatter in the cut.
One of the first telling signs of your chain's conditions are the chips from the cut. A properly sharpened chain will produce large uniform chips like these, and a dull chain will produce fine sawdust like this. When it starts getting like this, you know it's time to stop and sharpen your chain. So let's get started. First, you're going to need a few tools. A round file that's the correct diameter for your saw's chain. A filing device like this file guide will really help make the job easier. A flat file, a depth gauge tool, and finally, it makes the job much easier if you have some kind of clamping device to hold the bar while you're sharpening the chain. One more thing. Always wear safety glasses when sharpening your chain, and wear gloves to protect yourself from sharp cutters.
As Louis said, you'll need to have the proper file to fit the size of chain that you have. Your chainsaw's instruction manual will specify which file size to use, and your dealer can also help guide you to the proper tools. In this demonstration, we are sharpening a STIHL MS311 that has a 3/8 pitch chain. The manual calls for a 5.2 millimeter file to be used.
Also referred to as a 13/64.
So we have our 5.2 millimeter file and guide,
13/64.
which can also be purchased from a STIHL dealer. There are several other variations of filing tools that you can use. Again, your STIHL dealer can help you choose the one that is best for you, but the basic filing procedure will be the same regardless of the tool that you choose.
Rotate and inspect your chain and look for the cutter that's in the worst condition. You'll want to start with this tooth. Ultimately, in the end, you'll want every tooth on the chain to be sharpened exactly the same, and also to be the same length. If you don't, your saw won't cut properly. Make sure the chain is adjusted to be snug on the bottom of the bar rail, and then place your bar in a vise. If you're sharpening your chain in the field, there are handy stump vices like these that work great at holding your saw steady while sharpening.
We'll use this model of a chain's cutter to help explain the sharpening angle that will be important to you. First, this is the filing angle. You'll want your file to be parallel to this angle. If you vary from this angle, it will negatively affect the way the chain cuts. The tooth has a marking etched into it that you can follow. When you use the file and guide, you can see that the guide also has an angle to follow. When this angle is parallel to the guide bar, then your file will be at the correct filing angle. From the side of the cutter, you can see the side plate angle. This shows you how the cutter should look from this perspective when it's filed correctly. When holding the file, or in this case, the file and guide, you want to make sure that the file is held at a 90-degree angle to the bar and apply slight pressure back into the tooth. Tilting it up or down will negatively affect the way the chain cuts. An important component to this part of the sharpening process is having the correct size file. Too large of a file will cause a back slope, and too small of a file will cause a hook in the chain. Both have very negative consequences, so be absolutely sure you have the correct size file that matches up with your chain. When you use the file and guide, it shows you the proper filing angle as we mentioned before. And the plates on either side of the file rest on the chain components and give you the proper depth for the file in the cutter.
To begin sharpening your chain, always file from the inside of the tooth out. Cutters alternate from right-hand cutters to left-hand cutters. So as in this example, we begin by filing only the right-hand cutters first. When we're done with those, we will move to the other side of the bar and file the left-hand cutters. Set the chain brake to hold the chain in position. And file your first tooth from the inside of the cutter out, applying slight pressure back into the tooth with a smooth stroke. If your file is in good condition, you won't have to exert much pressure at all. Only file in one direction, then lift the file out of the cut to pull back. Letting the file drag on the cutting edge on the back stroke will dull the tooth. In most cases, your chain will require the same amount of filing strokes on each cutter, so count your strokes as you file the first tooth. Release the chain brake and move the chain with your gloved hand to the next cutter. Set the chain brake again and file the cutter with the same amount of strokes. Then, measure the two teeth to make sure they are close to identical in length and adjust if necessary. Once you are done with one side of cutters, move to the other side of the chain and file the remaining cutters. Now, we're not done yet. Next, we need to make sure the depth gauge is set correctly, and this is real important. The depth gauge in relation to the cutter acts much like a hand plane. The amount of gap between the top of the depth gauge and the leading edge of the top plate determines the amount of chip that will be taken out in the cut. Because the cutter slopes down, as it's sharpened and becomes shorter, the chain's depth gauge clearance becomes shallower and needs adjustment. If the clearance is too shallow, the tooth will not be able to cut. And if the clearance is too deep, this can put too much strain on the chain and the components of the chainsaw. These chains are designed to work optimally with specific clearance that controls the bite. By using your depth gauge and setting it on the chain, as we are here, you see where the depth gauge is protruding above the plate. If you file the depth gauge down to a level even with this plate, you will have the exact depth that you want for your chain. You'll need to do this on each tooth. Then, taper the edge of the depth gauge following the angle that is etched into the tooth.
And one last thing. When you filed your chain enough times to where your cutting edges are close to any of the angle marks etched into the chain, then you're ready for a new chain. So there you have it. You're now ready to get back to work with a freshly sharpened chain.
There you are. And if you're ever unsure how to sharpen your chain or how to use any steel products in general, visit one of our 8,000 locally owned steel servicing dealers.
Great job, Jen.
Thanks, Casey.
I'm Louis Casarella.
And I'm Jen Har.
We'll see you next time.
And I'll see you around.
Casey, we got your horse tied up outside.
Thanks, Louie. Appreciate it. Good luck, Jen.
Thanks. Same to you, Casey.
Thanks.